2 weeks after their rescue by the Star Hauler, the Rusty Dawn was approaching the Vega system when they received an unexpected communication. Captain Zix Star was reviewing their delivery schedule when Salandra called from her station. "Captain, we are being contacted by a mining vessel called the Deep Core. They say they need to speak with us urgently." "Put them through," Zix Star replied. Wondering what a mining ship would want with cargo traders, the main screen flickered to life, showing the face of a human woman with short brown hair and serious eyes. Behind her, the bridge of her ship looked functional but rough, with exposed metal and warning lights that cast strange shadows. "This is Captain Helen Foster of the mining vessel Deep Core," the woman said. "We received word that you folks had some trouble a few weeks back. Just wanted to check that everything is working out for you. We are fine now. Thank you," Zix Star replied carefully. "Your people were very helpful. Danny Rodriguez and his crew are good folks," Helen agreed. "But I noticed from the shipping reports that you're carrying high-value cargo through some pretty dangerous space. The asteroid belt near Vega 3 has been having pirate problems lately. We were not aware of this. Most traders aren't until it's too late. Tell you what, we're working a claim not far from your route. Why don't you swing by our operation? We can give you an escort through the dangerous areas, and I've got some upgrades that might help keep you safe." Zix Star looked at his crew, seeing the same mixture of suspicion and curiosity in their eyes that he felt. Another helpful human, appearing at exactly the right time with exactly the right offer. "What kind of upgrades?" he asked. "Shield improvements mostly. Space mining is dangerous work. We get hit by debris all the time. I've got some spare shield generators that would fit your ship perfectly. Consider it professional courtesy." 3 hours later, the Rusty Dawn was docked with the Deep Core at a mining station built into a large asteroid. The mining ship was massive, designed to break apart space rocks and extract valuable minerals. But like everything else the aliens had encountered lately, it seemed to have capabilities far beyond what was needed for its stated purpose. Captain Foster met them at the airlock, accompanied by 2 other humans carrying equipment cases. She was taller than she had appeared on screen, with the kind of muscle that came from working in heavy gravity. Her handshake was firm enough to crack bone. "Welcome to our little operation," she said, leading them through corridors lined with mining equipment. "We've been working this belt for 6 months now. Good mineral content, but the location makes it attractive to pirates too." The mining station was impressive, carved deep into the asteroid's core. But as they walked through the facility, Zix Star noticed things that seemed odd for a mining operation. There were communication arrays that looked military-grade defensive weapons that could take out a battleship, and storage areas that seemed designed for equipment rather than minerals. "You seem very well defended for miners," he observed. "Have to be out here," Helen replied. "Pirates don't just steal cargo. They'll take apart your whole operation if you're not ready for them. That's why I want to help you folks out. A defenseless cargo ship is just asking for trouble." Back aboard the Rusty Dawn, Helen's team began installing the new shield generators. They worked with the same efficiency and knowledge that the Star Hauler crew had shown, clearly familiar with every system on the ship. But the equipment they were installing was far more advanced than anything the aliens had seen before. These shield generators can deflect impacts from asteroids up to 50 meters across, Helen explained as her crew worked. "They'll also protect you from energy weapons, radiation storms, and just about anything else space can throw at you." "This seems like very expensive equipment for miners to give away," Vexiron commented, watching the installation process. "Mining is a profitable business when you know what you're doing," Helen replied. "Besides, we get these generators in bulk. Government surplus. You know how it is." But when Vexiron examined the shield generators more closely, he found serial numbers and markings that indicated they were not surplus at all. They were current military hardware, designed for ships much larger and more important than cargo freighters. The power requirements alone suggested they were meant to protect vessels that expected to come under serious attack. Captain, he called Zixtara aside. These are not mining equipment. These shield generators are rated for combat situations that no civilian ship should ever encounter. What are you saying? I am saying that these humans are giving us military-grade defensive systems and calling them safety equipment. Either they are very generous with very expensive gear, or they have reasons for wanting us to be well protected. While the shield installation continued, other things began happening around the ship. Helen's team made minor adjustments to various systems, always with explanations that sounded reasonable, but seemed to involve more work than necessary. Just optimizing your power flow, one technician explained as he installed new components in the engine room. These civilian ships never run at full efficiency from the factory. Adding some redundancy to your life support, another said as she worked on the environmental systems. Space is dangerous. You want backup systems for your backup systems. Upgrading your navigation computer, a third announced as he replaced processors that had been working fine. These old models are slow and unreliable. You'll appreciate the improvement. Each modification seemed innocent enough by itself, but taken together, they represented a complete transformation of the ship's capabilities. The navigation computer was now fast enough to calculate combat maneuvers. The life support could maintain atmosphere even if half the ship was destroyed. The power systems could handle loads that would burn out normal civilian equipment. What exactly do you mine here? Silandra asked Helen as they watched the work continue. Rare metals mostly, Helen replied. Platinum, iridium, some of the heavier elements that are hard to find. Very valuable stuff, which is why we have to be so careful about security. But when Silandra looked at the mining reports displayed on the station's computers, she found records of extraction operations that seemed to involve materials she had never heard of. There were references to quantum-stable alloys and gravitic resonance crystals, substances that sounded more like advanced technology components than simple metals. Helen, Silandra said carefully, some of these materials are not in any mining database I know about. Oh, those, Helen replied with a casual wave. Experimental stuff. We do some research work on the side for various clients. Nothing too exciting. But the quantities being extracted suggested operation on a massive scale, far beyond what any research project would require. And the client names in the records were mostly blocked out or listed as classified government contracts. After 2 days of work, Helen's team declared the upgrades complete. The Rusty Dawn now had defensive capabilities that could protect it from threats that most civilian ships could not even detect. But the aliens were becoming increasingly certain that they were not being told the whole truth about why these improvements were being made. How do we thank you for all this work? Zixtara asked as Helen prepared to return to her station. Just be careful out there, she replied. Space is getting more dangerous every day. Ships like yours need all the protection they can get. Ships like ours? Independent traders, carrying valuable cargo through remote areas, Helen explained. You're the backbone of interstellar commerce, but you're also the most vulnerable target. Someone needs to look out for you. As the deep core departed, the alien crew tested their new systems. The shield generators created an energy barrier around their ship that was invisible but incredibly strong. The sensors could now detect objects and energy patterns that had been hidden before. The computer systems processed information faster than seemed possible. Captain, Kreetok reported from the pilot station, the navigation computer is now showing hyperspace routes that are not on any public charts. It can calculate jumps through areas that are supposed to be impossible to navigate. And the sensors are detecting things that should not be there, Silandra added. There are ships moving through this system that are not transmitting identification signals. Military vessels, I think. Zixtara studied the new displays, seeing information that painted a very different picture of the space around them. There were patrol routes and monitoring stations that no civilian was supposed to know about. There were ships moving in formation patterns that suggested coordinated operations. And there were communication signals being transmitted on frequencies that were restricted to government and military use. "We are in the middle of something big," he said quietly. "These humans are not just being helpful, they are preparing. Use for something." Over the following days, the pattern continued. Every time they entered a new system, helpful humans appeared with offers of assistance, upgrades, and improvements. A research vessel called the Curiosity installed improved sensors that could detect objects light years away. A cargo ship named the Heavy Lifter added efficiency modifications to their engines that doubled their speed. A passenger liner called the Star Dancer upgraded their communication systems with equipment. 3 days into their journey to the Vega system, the Rusty Dawn's luck ran out. Captain Zixar was reviewing their cargo manifest when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and the steady hum of the engines changed to an uneven stuttering sound. "Captain, to the bridge." Vexiron's voice crackled through the intercom, filled with panic. "We have major system failures across all departments." Zixar ran to the bridge, where his crew was frantically working at their stations. Sparks flew from one of the control panels, and the main display showed a cascade of error messages in human text that none of them could read fast enough. "What happened?" he demanded. "The power distribution system overloaded," Kretok reported, his webbed hands dancing across the pilot controls. "We lost main engines, life support is running on backup power, and the hyperdrive is completely offline." "How long do we have?" 6 hours of air, maybe 8 if we shut down non-essential systems," Silandra replied from her station. "But we are in deep space, Captain. The nearest station is 3 days away at normal speed." Zixar felt his blood turn cold. They were stranded in the empty void between stars, with no way to call for help and no way to reach safety. There. Cargo of rare crystals would be worthless if they were all dead. "Can we repair the damage?" he asked Vexiron. "I would need parts we do not have and tools that are not on this ship," the engineer replied. "The humans built this vessel with components I do not fully understand. I can keep us alive for a few more hours, but I cannot fix the main systems." The captain stared at the star field on the main screen, trying to think of options they did not have. They could send a distress signal, but who would respond in this remote part of space? Pirates would take their cargo and leave them to die. The authorities would help, but by the time they arrived, it would be too late. "Send out a general distress call," he ordered. "Anyone who can help us." Silandra worked at her station, broadcasting their emergency on all frequencies. "Distress signal sent, Captain. I am also uploading our cargo manifest and current location to the Galactic Shipping Network." They waited in tense silence as the ship's system slowly failed around them. The lights dimmed as power was redirected to life support. The temperature began to drop as the heating systems shut down. One by one, the non-essential systems went dark. After 2 hours, Silandra suddenly sat up straight at her station. "Captain, I am receiving a response to our distress call. A human cargo vessel is requesting permission to approach and render assistance." "How far away are they?" "They say they can reach us in 40 minutes. The ship is called the Starhauler, commanded by someone named Danny Rodriguez." Zixar felt a glimmer of hope. "Tell them we accept their help. Send them our technical specifications so they know what they are dealing with." "Already done." "Captain, they say they are familiar with human ship designs and should be able to help us." 43 minutes later, the Starhauler dropped out of hyperspace near the disabled Rusty Dawn. The rescue ship was larger than theirs, with a hull that showed the scars of many years of hard use. As it approached, Zixar could see that. It was carrying external cargo pods and equipment that looked like it belonged to a mobile repair facility. "This is Captain Danny Rodriguez of the Starhauler," came a cheerful human voice over the radio. "We received your distress call, and we're here to help. Request permission to dock and bring our engineering team aboard." "Permission granted," Zixar replied. We are very grateful for your assistance. The docking process was smooth and professional. The Star Hauler's crew had obviously done this kind of rescue before. Within minutes, the airlocks were connected, and the human rescue team was aboard the Rusty Dawn. Captain Rodriguez was a middle-aged human with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He was followed by 3 other humans carrying tool cases and scanning equipment. They moved through the ship with the confidence of people who knew exactly what they were doing. "Don't worry, folks," Rodriguez said with a warm smile. "We'll have you fixed up in no time. This is Amy Chun, my chief engineer, Tony Blake, our systems specialist, and Kevin Park, our computer expert. They've seen everything that can go wrong with a ship like this." Amy Chun was a small woman with intense eyes and hands that never stopped moving. She immediately began pulling panels off the walls and examining the damaged systems. Tony Blake was a large man with gentle hands who seemed to understand machinery by touching it. Kevin Park was young and energetic, with fingers that flew across computer keyboards faster than the aliens could follow. "What happened here?" Amy asked, looking at the burned-out power distribution panel. "We do not know," Vexiron replied. "The system overloaded for no reason we could determine." Amy studied the damage with the expression of someone solving a puzzle. "This is a cascade failure. Started in the primary power relay, spread to the backup systems, and took out the main computers. Pretty common problem with this model if you push it too hard. Can it be repaired? Oh, sure. We've got the parts you need right here on our ship. Tony, can you handle the power systems? Kevin, you take the computers. I'll work on the engines." What happened next amazed the alien crew. The humans did not just repair the damaged systems, they improved them. Amy Chun rerouted power cables in ways that made the energy flow more efficiently. Tony Blake replaced damaged components with parts that were clearly superior to the originals. Kevin Park installed computer upgrades that made the ship's systems respond faster and more reliably. "You are making many changes," Zixtar observed as he watched Amy work. "Are all of these repairs necessary?" "Well, we're here anyway," Amy replied, not looking up from her work. "Might as well make sure this doesn't happen again. These modifications will make your ship much more reliable." The captain watched as the humans worked with tools and techniques he had never seen before. They seemed to understand the ship's systems better than his own engineer did. They knew where every component was located, how everything connected, and what each part was supposed to do. "Have you worked on ships like this before?" he asked Danny Rodriguez. "Oh, sure. We see a lot of these human freighters out here. They're good ships, but they need regular maintenance to keep them running properly. Most owners don't know how to take care of them right." As the hours passed, the Rusty Dawn began to change. The power systems that had been barely adequate became robust and efficient. The engines that had been running rough began to purr smoothly. The computers that had been slow and unreliable became fast and responsive. "Captain," Vexiron called from the engine room, "you need to see this. The fusion reactor is now producing 15,000 kilowatts instead of the original 10,000. The hyperdrive is charging in half the time it used to take. And the efficiency ratings are higher than they should be possible." Zixtar found his engineer staring at displays that showed system performance far beyond what their ship should have been capable of. "How is this possible?" "The humans have not just repaired our systems," Vexiron replied. "They have upgraded them with technology that is far more advanced than what we started with. Look at this." He pointed to a new component that Amy Chen had installed in the engine room. It was smaller than the part it replaced, but it was clearly much more sophisticated. The surface was covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "What is it?" "I do not know. But it is regulating power flow in ways that should not be possible with our level of technology. The humans have given U.S. equipment that is decades ahead of what we had before." On the bridge, Kevin Park was finishing his work on the computer systems. The displays now showed information in formats that were easier to read. and the controls responded to commands faster than ever before. But there were new features that had not been there before, systems that the aliens did not remember requesting. What are these new programs? Silandra asked, pointing to icons on her screen that she did not recognize. Oh, those are just standard safety features, Kevin replied casually. Emergency protocols, automated distress beacons, that sort of thing. Every ship should have them. But when Silandra examined the new programs more closely, she found that they were far more sophisticated than simple safety features. There were communication systems that could access frequencies she had never heard of, navigation programs that could calculate routes through space that were not on any public charts, and sensor protocols that could detect objects much smaller and farther away than any merchant would need. After 8 hours of work, the human team declared the repairs complete. The Rusty Dawn was not just functional again. It was better than it had ever been. The systems ran smoothly, the engines produced more power, and the computer displays showed performance readings that seemed too good to be true. How much do we owe you for this work? Zixstar asked as the humans prepared to leave. Nothing at all, Danny Rodriguez replied with a smile. Space is a dangerous place. We all need to help each other out here. Just remember to pay it forward when you see someone else in trouble. This is very generous, but surely your time and parts have value. Tell you what, Rodriguez said, if you ever run into another ship that needs help, you give them a hand. That's payment enough for us. The first day aboard the Rusty Dawn was a nightmare for the alien crew. Captain Zixstar sat in the patch captain's chair, watching his crew struggle with systems that seemed designed by someone who had never heard of efficiency or common sense. Every few minutes, someone would call out a new problem or confusion. Captain, the navigation computer keeps asking me to confirm my identity with something called a thumbprint, Kretok said from the pilot station. His webbed fingers hovered over a small glass square that glowed with red light. I do not have thumbs, and I do not understand what it wants. Try pressing any finger against it, Zixstar suggested, though he had no idea if that would work. Kretok pressed his longest finger against the scanner. The light turned green, and the navigation system came online with a cheerful beep. It worked, but why does it need to scan my finger to let me fly the ship? Human security measures, Silindra. Call from the communications station. They seem to think everything needs to be locked and protected. I have found 17 different passwords just to access the basic sensor array. The communications officer was surrounded by printed manuals, each one thicker than her arm. The humans had apparently written down instructions for everything, from how to start the coffee maker to how to perform emergency repairs in space. Every procedure had steps, and every step had warnings about what could go wrong. At least you can read human text. Vexiron's voice came through the intercom from the engine room. I am looking at machines that have labels in 3 different human languages, and half of them are covered with what appears to be jokes written in permanent marker. Zixstar left the bridge and walked through the ship's corridors, trying to understand what they had purchased. The walls were covered with pipes and cables, but instead of the neat, organized runs he was used to, everything seemed to twist and turn in random directions. Maintenance panels were secured with different types of fasteners, as if each one had been repaired by a different person with different tools. The cargo hold was functional but crude. The attachment points for securing cargo were simple metal loops welded to the deck, and the control panel for the loading systems had buttons labeled with human words like up, down, stop, and oh no. The last button was red and had a piece of tape over it with a note that read, "Only use in emergency." What kind of emergency requires a button labeled, "Oh no"? You wondered aloud. The crew quarters were small but comfortable, with beds that were too soft and storage spaces that were too small. The walls were covered with what looked like decorative panels, but closer inspection revealed they were actually access covers for various systems. The humans had apparently decided to make their maintenance. Hatches looked nice instead of just functional. The kitchen was a mystery unto itself. The food preparation area had devices that seemed designed for cooking methods the aliens had never seen. There was a box that heated food using invisible energy, a machine that turned water into steam for no apparent reason, and a device that made a bitter brown liquid that smelled like burnt plants. "Captain," Vexiron called over the intercom, "you need to see this." Zixtara made his way to the engine room, where his chief engineer was standing in front of an open control panel. The space behind the panel was filled with wires of different colors, all connected to a central hub that pulsed with blue light. "Look at this wiring," Vexiron said, pointing with one of his forearms. "It makes no sense by any engineering standard I know. The power distribution system routes energy through 17 different pathways when 3 would be more efficient. But here is the strange part. It works perfectly." "What do you mean?" "I mean, the power output is actually higher than what the specifications say it should be. The fusion reactor is rated for 10,000 kilowatts, but it is producing 12,000. The hyperdrive should take 4 hours to charge, but it finished in 3. Nothing about this ship should work as well as it does." Zixtara studied the mess of wires and components. "Could the humans have made a mistake in their documentation?" "That is what I thought at first," Vexiron replied. "But then I found this." He led the captain to another section of the engine room, where a large machine hummed quietly behind a protective screen. The machine was labeled Gravitational Field Generator, Mark 7, property of Human Colonial Navy. "Military equipment," Zixtara said, his yellow eyes widening. "This is not a civilian ship." "That is not all," Vexiron continued. "The hull plating is thicker than normal cargo ship standards. The structural support beams are reinforced with materials I cannot identify. And look at this." He pointed to a section of the ceiling where several thick cables ran parallel to each other. "These are not power cables. They are data conduits designed to carry massive amounts of information very quickly. No cargo ship needs this kind of communication capability." The captain's mind began to work through the implications. "What else have you found?" "The sensor array is far more sophisticated than it appears. Behind the simple displays on the bridge, there are systems that can track objects much smaller and farther away than any merchant would need. The shield generators are rated for impacts that would destroy most civilian vessels. And the computer systems have capabilities that are locked behind security protocols I cannot break." Zixtara felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying this ship is not what it appears to be?" "I am saying this ship was designed to look like something it is not," Vexiron replied. "Everything about it suggests it was built for purposes far beyond simple cargo transport." Meanwhile, on the bridge, Silandra was discovering her own mysteries. The communication system had access to frequency ranges that were restricted to military and government use. The navigation computer contained star charts that were far more detailed than anything available to civilian traders. And buried deep in the sensor logs, she found records of visits to worlds that were not on any public maps. "Captain," she called over the intercom, "I think our ship has been to places we are not supposed to know about." Kreetok was having his own revelations at the pilot station. The flight controls were more responsive than they should be, and the maneuvering thrusters were powerful enough to change course much faster than a cargo ship would need. The atmospheric flight systems were designed for operations in conditions that would be impossible for normal merchant vessels. "This ship can land on worlds with twice normal gravity," he reported. "It can operate in atmospheric conditions that would disable most civilian craft. The landing gear is reinforced for surfaces that will crush normal ships." As the day wore on, the crew began to compile a list of all the unusual features they had discovered. The picture that emerged was troubling and exciting at the same time. The Rusty Dawn was not just a cargo ship. It was something pretending to be a cargo ship. Why would the humans sell us a military vessel disguised as a freighter? Zixtara asked his crew as they gathered in the mess hall for their evening meal. "Perhaps it is stolen," suggested Kreetok. "Human military ships are valuable." If someone took one and needed to sell it quickly, they might disguise it as a civilian vessel. Or perhaps it is a trap, Salandra added. The humans are known for their complex plans. Maybe they want us to carry something for them without knowing what it is. Vexiron was quiet for a long moment before speaking. I have been thinking about this all day. The modifications to this ship are not random. They are systematic and purposeful. Someone spent a great deal of time and money to make a military vessel look like a cheap cargo ship while keeping all of its advanced capabilities. But why? The captain asked. I do not know, the engineer replied. But I suspect we will find out soon enough. That night, as the ship traveled through hyperspace toward their destination, strange things began to happen. The computer systems performed maintenance routines that no one had programmed. The sensors conducted sweeps of space that no one had requested. And deep in the ship's memory banks, encrypted messages were being transmitted to destinations unknown.in. His quarters, Captain Zixtar lay awake thinking about their situation. They had bought what they thought was a desperate solution to their problems, but it was becoming clear that they had stepped into something much larger and more complex than a simple ship purchase. The Rusty Dawn was full of secrets. And those secrets were connected to purposes that the humans had not shared with them. The question was whether those purposes would help them or destroy them. As he finally drifted off to sleep, the captain could not shake the feeling that they were no longer just cargo traders trying to deliver their goods. They had become part of something bigger, something that the humans had planned from the beginning. The ship continued its journey through hyperspace, its systems working with an efficiency that defied its crude appearance. In the depths of space, other ships were receiving signals from the Rusty Dawn, signals that confirmed the success of the first phase of a plan that had been years in the making. Operation Trojan Horse had begun, and the aliens were about to discover that their cheap ship was the most expensive purchase they had ever made. Captain Zixtara stood in the engine room of his merchant ship, staring at the twisted metal that had once been their main fusion core. The explosion 3 days ago had torn through the heart of their vessel, leaving them stranded in deep space, with nothing but emergency power keeping them alive. His scaled hand shook as he held the damage report, the numbers telling a story he did not want to believe. Captain, we have enough power for maybe 2 more days, said Vexiron, his chief engineer. The tall alien's 4 arms hung low at his sides, a sign of defeat among his people. The backup generators are failing too. We need a new ship, or we all die out here. Zixtar's yellow eyes closed for a moment. 20 years of trading across the galaxy, building his reputation and his crew, and now it would all end because of one bad jump through hyperspace. The cargo hold was full of rare crystals from the mining world of Kepler-7, worth enough to buy 3 ships like theirs. But without a working vessel, the crystals might as well be rocks. How much do we have left in the emergency fund? He asked, though he already knew the answer would not make him happy. After paying for the tow to Station Omega-7, we have 12,000 credits, replied Salandra, their communications officer. Her blue skin had turned pale with worry. Maybe enough for a small shuttle, but nothing that can carry our cargo. The captain's mind raced through their options. They could sell the cargo at a huge loss to buy passage home, abandoning their ship and their dreams. They could try to borrow money, but no bank would lend to a crew stranded in space. Or they could find the cheapest ship possible and pray it would last long enough to deliver their cargo. Set course for the trading post, he ordered. We need to find a ship dealer who works with people like us. Station Omega-7 was not the kind of place respectable merchants usually visited. Built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, it served as a haven for smugglers, pirates, and anyone else who preferred to stay away from government attention. The docking bay smelled of fuel and rust, and the lighting was dim enough to hide the faces of those who did not want to be seen. Zixtar and his crew walked through the narrow corridors, past bars and shops that looked like they had seen better days. The other aliens they passed gave them suspicious looks, recognizing them as outsiders who did not belong in this rough place. "There," said Kreetok, their pilot, pointing to a sign that read Morrison Ships and Parts. The building looked like it had been repaired many times, with patches of different colored metal covering holes in the walls. "Looks like our kind of place." The inside of the shop was worse than the outside. Old ship parts hung from the ceiling, and the floor was covered with oil stains and bits of metal. Behind a desk made from what looked like a piece of salvaged hull plating sat a human male, his gray hair unkempt and his clothes stained with grease. "Welcome to Morrison's," the human said, looking up from a datapad. "I'm Jake Morrison." "You? Folks look like you need help, and I'm in the business of helping people who need it cheap." Jake Morrison was not what the aliens expected from a ship dealer. Most of the traders they knew wore clean clothes and spoke in smooth, practiced words. This human looked like he had crawled out of an engine room, and his smile showed several missing teeth. "We need a ship," Zixtar said simply. "Something that can carry cargo and make hyperspace jumps." "We do not have much money." Jake's eyes lit up with interest. "How much is not much?" 12,000 credits, the captain replied, watching the human's face for disappointment. Instead, Jake's smile grew wider. "Well, you're in luck. I've got just the thing for you. Follow me." He led them outside to a fenced area behind the shop where several old ships sat like sleeping giants. Most looked like they had been abandoned for years, with rust covering their hulls and parts missing from their engines. Jake walked past all of them to a ship sitting alone in the corner. "Meet the Rusty Dawn," he said, patting the side of the vessel with obvious affection. "She's a genuine human freighter, built tough and ready to work. Previous owner had to sell fast, so I got her cheap. I can let you have her for exactly 12,000 credits." The alien stared at the ship in horror. The Rusty Dawn looked like it had been through a war and lost. Her hull was covered in patches of different colored metal, and several of her exterior lights were broken. One of her landing legs was clearly a replacement, held in place with what looked like welding and hope. "This thing flies?" asked Vex Eron, his voice filled with doubt. "Like a dream," Jake replied. "Human engineering, you know. We build things to last. Sure, she's not pretty, but she'll get you where you need to go and back again." Zixtara walked around the ship, his experienced eye taking in every detail. The hull was old but solid, with repairs that looked rough but effective. The engine ports were larger than he expected, suggesting more power than the ship's size would indicate. It was ugly, but it was also the only ship they could afford. What about the interior? He asked. Jake produced a key from his pocket. "See? For yourself." The inside of the ship was even worse than the outside. The corridor walls were lined with exposed pipes and cables, held in place with metal brackets that looked like they had been installed by someone in a hurry. The air smelled of oil and ozone, and the lighting came from strips of glowing panels that flickered occasionally. "Bridge is up front," Jake said, leading them forward. "Engine rooms in the back. Cargo hold in the middle. Everything you need, nothing you don't." The bridge was a cramped space filled with controls that looked primitive compared to what the aliens were used to. Instead of holographic displays, there were actual screens with buttons and switches. The captain's chair was patched with tape, and the navigation console had several warning lights that were currently flashing red. "Those lights always flash?" asked Kreetok, staring at the pilot's station. "Just need a little adjustment," Jake said casually. "Nothing a good engineer can't fix in a few hours." Vexiron opened a maintenance panel and peered inside. His four eyes went wide with shock. "Captain, the wiring in here looks like it was done by someone who learned electronics from a children's book. Half these connections are held together with twist ties and prayer." "Human twist ties," Jake corrected. "Best in the galaxy. We've been using them for centuries." The cargo hold was surprisingly large, easily big enough for their crystal shipment. The walls were lined with attachment points for securing cargo, and the floor was reinforced with metal plates. It was rough and basic, but it would do the job. The engine room is where she really shines, Jake said, leading them aft. Human fusion technology. Simple, reliable, and impossible to break. The engine room was a maze of pipes, tanks, and machines that hummed with barely contained energy. The fusion reactor was smaller than what they were used to, but it seemed to be running smoothly. The hyperdrive was an old model, but it looked like it had been recently serviced. It will work. Zixstar asked his engineer. Vexeron examined the systems with the careful attention of someone whose life would depend on their reliability. It is primitive, but functional. The power output is actually higher than I expected. The hyperdrive will need constant attention, but it should get us to our destination. Jake watched the aliens discuss their options in their own language, his expression patient but confident. He had seen this scene many times before, desperate people forced to choose between a risky purchase and certain failure. "Look," he said. "Finally, I know she's not much to look at. But the Rusty Dawn has been flying for 40 years, and she's never failed to bring her crew home. Previous owner, Lisa Murphy, ran cargo all over the sector in this ship. Only reason she sold was because she retired to a nice planet with good weather." Zixstar looked at his crew, seeing the same mixture of hope and fear in their eyes that he felt in his own heart. They needed this ship, and they had no other choice. "We will take it," he said. Jake's smile was genuinely warm as he shook the captain's scaled hand. "You're getting a good ship, Captain. The Rusty Dawn may not be fancy, but she's got something special. You'll see." As they completed the paperwork and transferred the credits, Jake seemed unusually cheerful for someone selling such a rough-looking vessel. The other humans around the trading post watched the transaction with knowing smiles, as if they were sharing a joke the aliens did not understand. "One piece of advice," Jake said, as he handed over the ship's codes. "The Rusty Dawn responds well to a gentle touch. Treat her right, and she'll surprise you." An hour later, the aliens were strapped into the bridge of their new ship, running through the pre-flight checks. The controls were strange and the responses were different from what they were used to, but everything seemed to work. "All systems ready," reported Vexeron from the engine room. "Fusion reactor is stable. Hyperdrive is charged. Cargo is secure," added Silandra. "Course is plotted for the Vega system." Zixstar looked at the main screen, showing the vast emptiness of space. Ahead of them. Behind them, Station Omega-7 grew smaller as they moved away from the asteroid. They had a ship, they had their cargo, and they had hope. "Take us out," he ordered Dot as the Rusty Dawn jumped to hyperspace. Jake Morrison stood in his shop, watching the stars through a grimy window. He pulled out a small communication device and pressed a button. The reply came immediately. "Understood. Will be." Dr. Lisa Carter had never been so tired in her life. She had been awake for 18 hours straight, studying the swarm bioships while the battle raged around her. The small laboratory aboard the UNS Liberty was cluttered with papers, computer, screens, and half-empty coffee cups. Carter was a scientist, not a soldier. She had joined the human fleet to study alien life forms, not to fight them. But sometimes science and war came together in unexpected ways. "There has to be something," she muttered to herself, scrolling through data on her computer screen. No living system is perfect. Everything has a weakness. Outside the laboratory, she could hear the sounds of battle. The human fleet was down to 5 ships now, and they were fighting desperately against impossible odds. Captain Morrison and his crew were buying time with their lives, and Carter knew she was running out of chances to find something useful. She had been studying the communication patterns between the bioships. Each time a ship was destroyed, it sent a burst of information to the other ships in the fleet. This was how they learned to adapt to new weapons and tactics. But Carter had noticed something strange in the data. The bioships weren't just sharing information about weapons. They were sharing everything. Battle formations, navigation data, even basic biological functions. It was like they were all connected by an invisible network. Carter pulled up a new set of readings and stared at them. The energy signatures were unlike anything she had seen before. The bioships were using something called quantum entanglement to share information instantly across vast distances. Of course, she whispered, they're not really separate ships at all. They're all part of one giant organism. The implications hit her like a physical blow. The swarm wasn't a fleet of individual ships working together. It was a single living creature with hundreds of bodies. Every bioship was like a cell in a massive brain, sharing thoughts and experiences with all the others. That's why they adapted so quickly. When one bioship learned how to defend against a human weapon, they all learned at the same time. The entire swarm shared a collective consciousness that processed information faster than any computer. But Carter's scientific training told her that every system had limits. Even the most perfect organism could be overwhelmed under the right conditions. She grabbed her communication headset and contacted the bridge. Captain Morrison, I need to speak with you immediately. Morrison's voice came back strained and tired. Kinda busy right now, Doc. Can it wait? No, it can't wait. I've found something important about how the swarm works. There was a pause. Then Morrison said, You have 2 minutes. Make it count. Carter took a deep breath and organized her thoughts. The bioships are all connected through quantum entanglement. They share information instantly across their entire fleet. That's why they adapt so fast. Okay, Morrison replied. How does that help us? Every communication system has a bandwidth limit, Carter explained. Think of it like a telephone line. You can only handle so many calls at once before the system overloads. Another pause. Carter could hear explosions in the background as the battle continued. What are you suggesting? Morrison asked. If we can flood their communication network with contradictory information, we might be able to cause a system overload, like jamming a radio frequency, but with their collective consciousness. Morrison was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, he said, How do we do that? Carter had been working on this problem for the past hour. We need to attack them with as many different weapons and tactics as possible, all at the same time. But here's the key. We can't sustain any single attack long enough for them to adapt to it. I don't understand. Think of it like this, Carter said, searching for a simple way to explain quantum biology. If one bioship gets hit with a kinetic weapon, it tries to tell all the others how to defend against kinetic weapons. But if another ship gets hit with an energy weapon at the same time, it's trying to tell them how to defend against energy weapons. The lights in the laboratory flickered as the Liberty took a hit from enemy fire. Carter steadied herself against the wall and continued. If we can hit them with enough different attacks simultaneously, their communication network won't be able to process all the adaptation requests. The system will overload and crash. Morrison was starting to understand. Like trying to run too many programs on a computer at once. Exactly. But we need perfect timing. Every ship has to attack at exactly the same moment, using completely different methods. Doc, we only have 5 ships left. Is that enough? Carter checked her calculations one more time. It should be, but we'll only get one chance. If this doesn't work, the swarm will adapt to the overload technique and will never be able to use it again. Morrison made his decision quickly. All right, tell me exactly what you need. Carter grabbed a piece of paper and started writing instructions. Each ship needs to use a different type of weapon. Kinetic rounds, energy beams, chemical explosives, physical ramming, and one ship needs to try something completely new that the swarm has never seen before. What about timing? Everyone attacks at exactly the same second. No delays, no hesitation. The bioships need to receive all the adaptation signals simultaneously. Morrison was already planning the attack. I'll coordinate from here. How long do we have to prepare? Carter looked at her computer screen showing the swarm's approach. They'll be in optimal range in 15 minutes. That's when we need to strike. The next 15 minutes pass like hours. Morrison contacted each of the remaining human ships and explained the plan. Every captain understood that this was their last chance. If Carter's theory didn't work, they would all be dead within the hour. Captain Kate Sullivan of the Uns Defiant would use kinetic weapons. Captain Ben Miller of the Uns Ranger would use energy beams. Captain Sandra Kim of the Uns Warrior would use chemical explosives. Captain Tony Garcia of the UNS Frontier would attempt a ramming attack. Morrison would try something new, something the swarm had never encountered before. Walsh, Morrison called to his chief engineer. Remember those old atmospheric processors we removed from Cargo Bay 2? Walsh nodded. Yeah, they're sitting in storage. Why? Can you rig them to create a massive electromagnetic pulse? Walsh thought for a moment. Probably. But it would burn out every electronic system on the ship, including ours. Do it, Morrison ordered. We won't need electronics if we're dead. With 5 minutes to go, all the human ships were in position. The swarm bioships had formed a tight attack formation, confident that they could overwhelm the remaining human defenders. Carter was on the bridge now, watching the countdown timer on the main display. Her hands were shaking with nervousness. Everything depended on her theory being correct. 2 minutes, Morrison announced to the fleet. Remember, everyone attacks at exactly the same time. No early shots, no hesitation. The bioships moved closer, their organic hulls pulsing with anticipation. They had learned to counter every human tactic. They were ready for anything the humans might try, except they weren't ready for everything at once. 30 seconds, Morrison counted down. All ships report ready. Carter held her breath. In 30 seconds, they would either save 12 million lives or die trying. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Attack! All 5 human ships opened fire simultaneously. Sullivan's kinetic rounds, Miller's energy beams, Kim's chemical explosives, Garcia's ramming attack, and Morrison's electromagnetic pulse all struck different bioships at exactly the same instant. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The bioships continued their advance, apparently unaffected by the coordinated attack. Then something strange began to occur. The bioships started moving erratically. Some turned left, others turned right. A few simply stopped moving altogether. It's working, Carter whispered, watching her instruments. The quantum entanglement network is overloading. The bioship's collective consciousness was trying to process 5 different adaptation protocols at the same time. The communication network that had been their greatest strength was now tearing itself apart. Some bioships began firing on their own allies. Others spun in circles, unable to process conflicting navigation data. Several ships simply shut down completely, their organic systems overwhelmed by contradictory information. All ships, continue the attack, Morrison ordered. Keep changing tactics. Don't let them recover. The human fleet pressed their advantage. They switched weapons every few seconds, creating new sources of confusion for the overloaded swarm network. The bioships that had seemed invincible just minutes before were now helpless against enemies they couldn't understand. Carter watched the bioship's formation fall apart with a mixture of relief and scientific fascination. Her theory had worked. The swarm's perfect adaptation system had become their perfect weakness, but the battle wasn't over yet. There were still hundreds of bioships in the system, and the humans had only damaged a small portion of them. The swarm would eventually recover from the overload and adapt to this new tactic. Captain, Rodriguez called from her station, I'm detecting movement at the edge of the system. The coalition fleet is returning. Morrison smiled for the first time in hours. Signal them our frequency. It's time to finish this fight.